Assalamualaikum. My name is Suria Izzati binti Shaharudin. Together with my partner, will present to you our research study, which is voting behaviours among FSPPP students in choosing Student Representative Council election at UiTM Seremban campus.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nadheera binti Roslan, and I will present the second part of the research project.
First and foremost, we will start with research background. According to Sheila 2020, voting for an election is a democratic process. People have their own right as citizens to choose their representative which act as a policy-making bodies in Malaysia. Based on the findings from Ming 2017, there is the least number of young people or youth who participate in politics, especially in the voting process. The purpose of this study conducted is to determine the factors that influence voting behaviours among FSPPP students in MPP elections at UiTM Seremban campus. There are 4 factors that influence the voting behaviours in this research, which are candidate image, the use of election manifesto, awareness of campus election, and peers influence. Now, let's move to the problem statement. According to the report obtained from the Department of Student Affairs UiTM 2020 have showed that the percentage of students that go out for voting in the campus election are low for 2 years respectively. The percentage of students going out to vote in 2019 and 2020 has declined as compared to 2018. According to the report, the percentage of voters turned out only 77.08% as compared to the 2018. Some students refuse to spend their time to go voting for election because they think that their votes are not important and could not change anything in the university system process. This has led to the low voters turnout issue. Next is research question and research objective. There are 5 objectives in this research, which are firstly to determine the relationship between candidate image and voting behaviour among FSPPP students. Secondly, to determine the relationship between the use of election manifesto and voting behaviour among FSPPP students. Thirdly, to determine the relationship between awareness of campus election and voting behaviour. Fourthly, to determine the relationship between peers influence and voting behaviour. And lastly, to identify the most significant variables that increases the voting behaviour among FSPPP students in choosing the Student Representative Council election at UiTM Seremban campus. While for research questions, it is the reflection of the research objective.
For the literature review, firstly is candidate image, where according to Balmas and Schiffer 2010, stated that the most important value of candidate image that must have in the candidate is leadership, intelligence, morality, credibility, and power. Candidate image can be seen as a group of voter observation and perception towards the candidate. Secondly is use of election manifesto, where according to Muhammad 2020, it stated that manifesto is the old statement of political intent and in some cases a call for action or support in a revolutionary situation. The use of manifesto is the election process will become a mechanism of communication and policy positioning documents for the campaign party in representative democracy that may develop a document to influence the vote. Is awareness of campus election, where according to Mugume and Mashamela stated that it is a sensitive attitude taking cognizance and being aware of the existence of student representative council election by students, especially the importance of student participation in the election to improve awareness. The university should provide information about the candidates and their policy proposal. Lastly is peers influence, where according to Natalie 2090, stated that it is a group of people with similar interests, background or social status of approximately the same age. The members of this group are likely to influence the belief and behavior of an individual. Conceptual framework is the element that illustrates the dependent and independent variables of the factors that influence student voting behavior for MPP election at UiTM. So from this diagram, we can see that 4 independent variables, which is candidate image, use of election manifesto, awareness of campus election, and peers influence, have a relationship with the voting behavior among FS-PPP students. Hypothesis is the process that involved in making the prediction about what will happen in a particular study. They are developed by considering existing evidence and using a reasoning to what will happen in the specific context of interest. For candidate image, the hypothesis development is HO1. There is no significant relationship between candidate image and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. HA1, there is a significant relationship between candidate image and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. For use of election manifesto, the hypothesis development is HO2. There is no significant relationship between the use of election manifesto and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. H2, there is a significant relationship between the use of election manifesto and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. Of campus election, the hypothesis development is HO3. There is no significant relationship between awareness of campus election and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. HA3, there is a significant relationship between awareness of campus election and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. Peers influence, the hypothesis development is HO4. There is no significant relationship between peers influence and voting behavior among FS-PPP students. HA4, there is significant relationship between the peers influence and voting behavior among FS-PPP students in UiTM Seremban 3.
Let's continue with the research methodology. For research design, we have chosen a quantitative method in order to collect the data and also the information. For the unit of analysis, the study of our research will be focusing on the individual student from the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Study at University Teknologi Mara Seremban campus. Next, we have chosen 300 respondents among FS-PPP students to be our sample size. For sampling technique, we choose the non-probability sampling, which is the convenient sampling. Students from the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Study FS-PPP will be independently chosen as our respondents due to the ease of access in order to collect the data from the respondents. Next, we move to the data measurement. Likert scale will be used with the measurement of 1 to 5 from strongly disagree to strongly agree. For the data collection, it consists of 6 questions, which are Section A, respondent information, Section B, candidate image, Section C, the use of election manifesto, Section D, awareness of campus election, Section E, peers influence, and also Section F, intention of students to vote. All of this section consists of 6 questions each in order to collect the data for our research. Last but not least will be the data analysis. Statistical analysis was performed by using SPSS and also Pearson correlation and multiple regression were used to test the proposed model. Let's continue with the research findings. For gender, the finding indicates that most of the respondents involved in the study comes from the female respondents, which are 171 respondents or 57%. Next is age. The age of 21 until 23 years old have the highest percentage, which is 44.3% or 133 respondents. For part, the highest respondents come from Part 6, which represent 105 students or 35%. For the current academic undertaking, degree students have the highest respondents, which constitute 194 respondents as compared to the diploma students. Next is program. For program, it shows that AM228 have the highest respondent, which is 100 or 33.3% respondents. For the benefits of MPP election, it shows that 93% of the respondents believe the MPP election will benefit the students, while only 7% of the respondents believe MPP election not benefited to.
Next, we go to the main finding, where the first objective is to determine the relationship between candidate image and voting behavior among FSPP students. We use present correlation and the result is 0.222. The hypothesis is H1 are accepted and H0 are rejected. The second objective is to determine the relationship between use of election manifesto and voting behavior among FSPPP students. We use present correlation and the result is 0.188. The hypothesis is H2 are accepted and H02 are rejected. Third objective is to determine the relationship between awareness of campus election and voting behavior among FSPPP students. We use present correlation and the result is 0.120. The hypothesis is H3 are accepted and H03 are rejected. The fourth objective is to determine the relationship between peers influence and voting behavior among FSPPP students. We use present correlation and the result is 0.428. The hypothesis is H4 are accepted and H04 are rejected. The last objective is to identify the most significant variable that increase the voting behavior among FSPPP students. We use multiple regression. The hypothesis is show the strongest independent variable that influence the voting behavior of students is peers influence. In research contribution, we believe this research paper will have improved knowledge about election, where through this paper, it will expand more knowledge about election among the students. The involvement of students in campus election will help them to understand the real process of democratic system to elect the leaders. Students are able to learn how to choose candidate, campaign, vote, and understand the system through the university election. The study also will indirectly educate students about the importance of political participation before they leave university to live in the uni community. Second research contribution is responsibility to vote for election, where through this paper it will increase the awareness of the students about the importance of students to vote in election. The student will aware with their responsibility to go to vote and choose their representative in campus election, because every voters are matters. The third research contribution is build momentum toward the election day, where through this study, it will create the engagement between university and student in participating in campus election. MPP election will help create the excitement feeling among the student and the voters and educate the student about the process of election.
Next is limitations of study. First is limited model. It was mentioned by Brennan 2018, most models are unable to include certain information needed by researcher to conduct the study. As a recommendation, future researchers should use other approaches that may give more impact toward the voting behavior. The second limitation is quantitative study, whereby the respondents have limited choice of answers and options based on the researchers' selections. The result may be vary because it only focuses on the one faculty, which is FSPPP only. Therefore, a future study on a larger sample population is suggested in order to collect more data and improve the result. Lastly, limitation on distributing the questionnaires. The research was conducted via online questionnaires due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Collecting data is difficult for the researcher because the respondents can only be reached via online or social media platforms such as WhatsApp. For future recommendations, researchers should be able to reach out the respondents in person by having such an interview so that the researcher can get the data immediately.
In conclusion, this study focused on identifying the relationship between voting behavior among FSPPP students in the Student Representative Council MPP election at UiTM Seremban 3, an independent variable which is candidate image, use of election manifesto, awareness of campus election, and peers influence. The study also claimed that most significant positive relationship is the relationship between peers influence and voting behavior among FSPPP students. In the future, this study will become the references for other researchers to identify a new perspective about the voting behavior among the students.